How can a single bottle of wine completely change your understanding of what wine can be? What makes a wine so remarkable that you can almost taste it again in your memory decades later? And why are people drawn to tasting notes and trying to write them, even when words can never fully capture the experience of tasting and smelling wine? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in our chat with Neal Hulkower, a PhD rocket scientist who has just published his first book, Grape Explications. By the end of our conversation, you'll also discover what surprised Neal most when rereading 50 years of his own wine writing while compiling the book, how his palate, perspective, and choice of writing topics evolved over his lifetime, how the Duncan Hines Memorial Bon Vivant Fellowship turned academic milestones into structured wine rituals, how keeping meticulous notes helped Neal develop both his palate and his writing voice, what pushed Neal to leave academia for the wine industry, the emerging wine regions Neal encountered while moving across the United States, what changed when Neal left a high-level technology career to become a freelance wine writer, and how Neal has merged his two passions, wine and math. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 376. So, what's new in the drinks world this week? Globally, the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics are driving media headlines. Prosecco DOC's status as the official sparkling wine of the Olympics gives the Italian fizz pride of place in hospitality events, and you can expect to see plenty metal-colored Prosecco pours in fan zones and VIP lounges as the games roll on. Figure skating legend Brian Boitano is co-hosting a guided wine tasting with wine educator Filippo Bartolotta to introduce wines of Italy to the foreign press. In Toronto, Mayor Olivia Chow has successfully pushed for 9 a.m. alcohol service hours during the Olympics, February 6th to the 22nd, so fans can cheer on Team Canada with a mimosa in hand, or maybe something stronger. Ontario is seeing interest in new-to-many drinks, like Makgeolli, a Korean rice wine, which you can now buy at the LCBO. It's lightly sparkling, milky white, and sits in that zone between beer and wine. Quebec drinkers, meanwhile, are about to get a very different type of offering. Starting February 12th, the SAQ has permission to sell off select U.S. spirits that were stranded by last year's import ban, mainly cream liqueurs and other clear glass bottles whose quality might start to slip if they sit too long, all with a 15% discount, and the revenue going to food banks of Quebec. It's a limited time, politically complicated clearance rack. Here are your food and drink holidays this week. February 11th is National Latte Day. Hello, coffee stout float. Or espresso martini riff with a non-alc coffee spirit. It's also National Peppermint Patty Day. Make minty martinis or float peppermint schnapps in hot chocolate, or try a peppermint patty martini with creme de menthe and a dark chocolate liqueur. That sounds good. February 12th is National Biscotti Day. Vinsanto Energy or Amaro or Almond Biscotti. February 13th is National Cheddar Day plus Italian Food Day. Cheddar with off-dry Riesling or Italy with a spritz flight. It's also National Tortellini Day. I don't know why that's not covered in Italian Food Day, but anyway. Pair with Prosecco or crisp Soave. Did you know that tortellini was allegedly inspired by the shape of Venus's navel? It's a cheeky pairing for a pre-Valentine's dinner day warm-up. And of course, Feb 14th is Valentine's Day. It's also Cream-Filled Chocolates Day, port and truffles, or maybe a raspberry chocolate stout? National Gumdrop Day is on February 15th. Why not try some vodka gummy bears? International Syrah Day is on February 16th. You want to get creative? Host a blind Syrah challenge where you compare a cool climate Syrah against a warmer one, say Ontario versus Australia. February 16th is National Almond Day. Try an amaretto sour or almond croissant with sparkling wine. And finally, February 17th is Café au lait Day and the Lunar New Year. So you could create a red and gold cocktail garnish challenge and pair dumplings with aromatic whites, or even spike your drink with Irish cream. It's a quadruple header this week when it comes to hearts and roses. Clearly, I've been listening to too much Olympic commentary. Well, I ran the gauntlet of doing 4 Valentine's Day show specials, starting with CTV or Morning, where we talked about if you're flying solo or want to celebrate the bonds that really last. Friendship. Galentine's Day. That's Friday, February 13th. You know, I always say friends are the family you choose, so let's raise a glass to them. Galentine's Day is one of those fun micro-holidays like Friendsgiving that celebrates friendship. Comedian Amy Poehler created it back in 2010 on her show Parks and Recreation. The premise? Women coming together to do what they do best, a long boozy brunch. Think Lilith Fair minus the angst plus frittatas. And let's be honest, the bond between women and wine tends to outlast most relationships. Since then, we've included men with Bromance Day, but I have no idea where that came from. So let's start with the Jackson Triggs Sparkling Reserve Brut. This elegant bubbly from Niagara has a gorgeous, toasty, freshly baked character that gives it a depth that most sparkling wines can only dream about. The fine, persistent bubbles create this luxurious, creamy texture on your palate. It does make you wonder why any other carbonated beverage even bothers trying. You'll notice beautiful notes of baked honey, apple, toasted almonds dancing through the glass. The balanced acidity makes it incredibly food-friendly. And at just $17.95, it's an amazing value, especially when you consider that most champagnes start at $80. Patriotism never tasted this great. Next up, we have the Mindful Rosé, another VQA wine from Niagara. Here's something that's perfect for those who want to keep the celebration going without overdoing it. This gorgeous pale rosé from Lakeview Wine Company has Pinot Noir in the blend. Pinot Noir, of course, is known as the heartbreak grape because it's so difficult to grow. But when you find the right one, the romance is real, baby. This wine is made for people who want a real glass of wine, just lighter with lower alcohol at 8% and remarkably low sugar at just 1 gram per serving. But light doesn't mean boring. You still get the pretty floral aromatics and a bright mix of strawberry, red currant, cherry, and raspberry. It's light and crisp and keeps you reaching for the next sip. At $13.95, it also pairs beautifully with the smoky notes in burning your ex's love letters or those work files he couldn't find when he was moving out. Closure tastes different for everyone. Next up, the Lenzmosher Gruner Veltliner from Austria. This Austrian beauty is what brunch dreams with your besties are made of. Gruner Veltliner is Austria's signature white grape, and it's like having a major moment now. It's crisp and refreshing with vibrant citrus notes, white, pepper, and a mineral quality that makes your mouth water. This wine has fantastic weight and texture without feeling heavy, and it'll cut through rich egg dishes, frittatas, quiche like nobody's business. The finish is clean and zippy. Next up, try the Carolyn's Irish Cream. What makes Carolyn's special is that it's made with real Irish farm fresh cream, the finest Irish whiskey and spirits, and it's sweetened with naturally harvested honey, not artificial sweeteners. You can really taste the difference. It's smooth, rich, and it has this beautiful balance of sweetness and whiskey warmth. Basically, it's a hug from Ireland in liquid form. It's amazing in coffee, but it also shines in an espresso-tini. This is the cocktail that says, I'm classy and caffeinated, which is honestly the best version of anyone. So, you can get the recipe in the show notes, nataliemclean.com/376, but here are a couple martini drinks you can make. So you combine Carolyn's, vodka, and an espresso shot in a shaker with ice. Just shake it up till it's chilled and frothy, then serve in a glass. Maybe you want to garnish with a few coffee beans. You can also try the marshmallow toasted coconut cocktail, 2 ounces of Carolyn's cream, and 2 ounces of toasted coconut run. That's it. Garnish with a marshmallow. Carolyn's was awarded platinum at the 2026 San Francisco World Spirits Competition, which means it's won double gold 3 years in a row. That is like winning the Deliciousness Olympics. And yes, it pairs beautifully with chocolate. The golden rule, make sure your drink is sweeter than the chocolate. Otherwise, it'll taste bitter by comparison. So dark chocolate is always the easiest to compare because it has the least sugar and dairy, but the most cocoa. So whether you're celebrating romance or friendship this weekend, remember that the sparkle is both in your glass and in the eyes of the other. All right, stepping up to the plate for Valentine's show number 2 on CTV's CP24. Have you ever wondered which drinks pair best with the roller coaster ride of romance? From first dates to final goodbyes, we're exploring wines that match every stage of your love life. My motto for Valentine's Day: candy is dandy, liquor is quicker, but wine is divine. Let's start with first dates. What to drink with those nerve-wracking initial encounters? Try the Saintly Rosé Sparkling, the perfect icebreaker for those butterfly moments. It flirts with wild strawberry and rose petal aromas, the ideal balance of fresh and fruity. Now, what if that first date goes really, really well? Well, this wine also tastes like saying yes. Getting engaged calls for a joyous wine and rosé-colored glasses. Optimism pairs beautifully with bubbles, and how else would you get married these days given the statistics? But not so glum-chum when you taste this delightful sparkling rosé. It's proudly Canadian from Ontario. Next up, the Dockside Premium Red Blend, a terrific VQA from Ontario. When you've been ghosted, swipe right on this Ontario Red that's full-bodied, offering consistently great pleasure. It shows up, it's emotionally available, and it finishes strong, unlike that idiot who never texted you back. Can you taste the ripe dark berries and mocha? It also has a long finish, leaving you longing for more. Next up, I have the Carolyn's Irish Cream. It's perfect for a quiet night in or just because it's Tuesday and you're in love. Now, I'm not going to repeat the things I've already told you about Carolyn's Irish Cream, other than to say I loved it so much I featured it on 2 shows. Now, speaking of the Olympics, feel free to try the Rossi Diageo Limoncello from Italy. For anniversaries, limoncello is like a perfect marriage, complex, well-structured, and built to last. Traditional Italian limoncello is made by steeping lemon zest in pure alcohol for weeks, extracting all those gorgeous essential oils before adding some sweetness for balance. Serve it well chilled. It's meant to be a digestif to help settle your stomach after a romantic meal. This limoncello opens with a rush of sunlit lemon peel, a touch of pithy bitterness, and cool, silky sweetness that glides across the palate with finesse. Its texture is plush yet refreshing, finishing with a clean snap of citrus that keeps it lively rather than cloying. And here's a toast. May your glass and your heart always be full. And the third and final, because I already shared the social with you on last week's episode. So, whether you're planning an intimate dinner for 2 or celebrating with friends, pairing the drinks with passion-inducing aphrodisiac foods can turn any evening into something truly memorable, and that is exactly what we talk about on City TV's Breakfast Television. These libido-lifting matches will prove that the way to the heart is through the stomach, with a detour to your taste buds first. Let's start with oysters. They have a deliciously scandalous history. The ancient Romans named them as an aphrodisiac, but then again, they also thought the same about turnips, so their track record is kind of spotty. Casanova, that legendary 18th century Venetian lover, ate 40 oysters every morning for breakfast with his mistress in a bathtub built for 2. Now that's dedication. The science actually backs this up. Oysters are loaded with zinc, copper, and iron, all the essential minerals for male fertility and energy. The challenge with oysters is that briny iodine flavor. You need something clean and crisp to refresh your palate. The beautiful oysters, as well as the cheeses, chocolates, and bacon for this segment, were kindly provided by our friends at Rabba Fine Foods in Toronto. Give them a visit. So we paired the oysters with Evolve Dealcoholized Sparkles from British Columbia. Crafted from 100% Okanagan Valley Gewürztraminer, this frizzante bursts with lychee, rose petal, and citrus notes. What makes it special is that it delivers full aromatic character with just 0.2% alcohol, so you get all the celebration without any compromise. The golden hue is gorgeous, and those lively bubbles cut right through the oyster's richness. You can taste the peach, tropical fruit, and bright citrus with the refreshing finish. It's elegant, sophisticated, and proves you don't need alcohol to create something extraordinary. I also have the Evolve Light Sparkles at 7%. That represents a whole new category between zero alcohol and full strength. That's the Goldilocks sweet spot. It's for those moments when you want something with a bit more presence, but still want to stay clear-headed for whatever the evening brings, if you know what I mean. All right, so try this. It's crafted from classic Chardonnay and Pinot Noir with a portion of the Chardonnay fermented in concrete, which gives it incredible texture. Hand-picked grapes from select vineyard sites, harvested early, like traditional sparkling wine, also add to the quality. I should mention that Evolve Sparkling House in the Okanagan is doing a whole bunch of really fun events for Valentine's Day. So if you're in that area or you want to make it a destination trip, February 13th, they're hosting I Can Buy Myself Flowers, a Galentine's Day event with a do-it-yourself bouquet workshop. And of course, you'll be drinking wine when you do that, so who cares what they look like in the end. And on the 14th and 15th, they're offering Brut and Brunch, a 3-course sparkling brunch created by their chef, with each course paired with their sparklings. That sounds really good. And if you're more into chocolate, they have their Cuvée and Cacao experience that pairs handcrafted chocolates with both sparkling and still wines in a seated guided tasting. It's romance that you can actually taste and count on, for God's sakes. Anyway, let's talk about rosé. Whispering Angel from Provence. It's pretty and pink, and you've probably seen it on Instagram, but this is a seriously great benchmark wine, like your photogenic friend who also happens to have a PhD, and it's transformed the entire rosé category into the fastest growing wine category globally. The name comes from the cherub carvings in the chapel at Château d'Esclans, where it's made, now celebrating its 20th vintage. This wine has converted more rosé skeptics than any other I know. It has a beautiful pale salmon pink hue and opens with delicate red berries and citrus. The medium body is sculpted by brisk acidity that gives it real structure. This wine pairs with everything from oysters to soft cheeses. Speaking of soft cheeses, Camembert and Brie are pure sensuality as they ooze like lava over crusty baguette, oozing, coating every crevice of your mouth. Yes, please. The creaminess needs that brisk acidity like the snap of a whip to cut right through it. And that's exactly what Whispering Angel does, because it's heaven sent. Hashtag full circle moment. Now, I'm also nominating bacon as one of the most potent aphrodisiacs on the planet. Here's the science behind it. Studies show that certain aromas increase blood flow to strategic areas. For men, it's pumpkin pie and lavender. For women, it's cucumber and licorice. Basically, men feel romantic about Thanksgiving and women a day at the spa. Makes sense. Interestingly, people who lose their sense of smell lose their sexual appetite. Now, bacon hasn't been scientifically proven yet, but think about it. Is there anything sexier in the morning than someone who cooks bacon for you and does the dishes afterwards? People, that's not romance. That's a marriage proposal. Whew. So for bacon, you need something with depth and complexity. Enter Liqueur 43. This premium liqueur has a fascinating backstory. When the Romans conquered Carthago Nova, they discovered a golden aromatic elixir made with local fruits and herbs called Liqueur Mirabilis, miracle liquor. The Romans banned it to avoid temptation, but the Carthaginians kept making it in secret. Prohibition never works, Rome. When will empires ever learn? That's probably the start of their fall. Anyway, this ancient elixir inspires Liqueur 43's recipe today, made with 43 natural ingredients, including Mediterranean citrus fruits and botanicals. It's now the #1 selling Spanish liqueur in the world and the fastest growing premium liqueur globally. Wine Enthusiast magazine named the Carajillo the best cocktail of the year, and it has just 2 ingredients, liqueur 43 and coffee. Again, I'll put the recipe on my website, nataliemaclean.com/376, but this is glorious. Add ice cubes to your martini glass, pour 50 milliliters, I've translated the ounces on there, of liqueur 43, a shot of espresso, ice cubes, and shake well. It should froth at the top. It's essentially a caffeinated hug that tells you everything's going to be okay, even if you forgot to buy a Valentine's Day card. Online searches for Carajillo were up 11%, and they're set to overtake searches for espresso martini. And that's because liqueur 43's versatility is incredible. You can use it in desserts like tiramisu, cheesecake, macaroons, as well as pancakes, crepes, and French toast. Basically, if it's on a brunch or dessert menu, liqueur 43 can make it better. It's the overachiever of liqueurs. And for chocolate lovers, just when you thought I forgot about you, no, I didn't. Casanova loved chocolate too. He drank a cup of hot chocolate every day. It's a wonder how he kept his trim, manly figure. Chocolate ignites the same positive endorphins as being in love, which is why I've been in a committed relationship with chocolate now for 10 years. It's chemistry and romance in one delicious package. We are so happy together. After 70 years, liqueur 43 has just introduced a sibling worthy of the original, the liqueur 43 horchata. This light, deliciously silky Spanish liqueur is inspired by horchata, the iconic Spanish drink, fused with original liqueur 43. It's vegan, gluten-free, and absolutely delicious. Finally, a treat that checks all the dietary restriction boxes and tastes amazing. Take that, boring rice crackers. The aroma alone is captivating. Spice, citrus, roasted nuts, and a subtle floral touch of summer sunsets on the Mediterranean coast. Take me there now, Juan. At 16% alcohol, it's distinct from any other liqueur. The refreshing taste leaves no one indifferent. You either like it or you love it. It's most commonly served over ice, and it's a fun, tasty addition to fresh espresso or coffee. And another final toast. Here's to the person who loves you enough to cook bacon but respects you enough to give you the last crispy piece. And may your heart stay light, your spirit stay bright, and your glass never find its bottom before the conversation does. On upcoming TV shows, we'll be chatting about fresh spring wines for March, St. Patrick's Day, beer and spirits and wine, and environmentally sustainable drinks for Earth Hour, Easter, Mother's Day, Father's Day, and any other day you can think of. Let me know if you'd like a brand featured on these TV segments or future ones, or if you'd like to advertise with us through our podcast, newsletter, website, social media, or mobile apps. Please email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. I'll be sharing more sips and tips on Instagram at Natalie McLean Wine. So join me there for more of the weird and the wonderful. Back to today's episode. 3 of you will win a copy of Neal's new book. And if you'd like to win, please email me and say, hey, I'd like to win. It doesn't matter where you live. I'll choose 3 winners randomly from those who contact me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. If you're reading the paper book or ebook or listening to the audiobook of my wine memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, a national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of the year, I'd love to hear from you. I'm in a race with myself to see how fast I can say that. Got to keep it interesting, right? Some of these repetitive things. So anyway, I'll put a link in the show notes to all the retailers worldwide at nataliemaclean.com/376. Okay, on with the show. Neal Hulkower is an applied mathematician and freelance writer living in McMinnville, Oregon. He's been writing about wine since the early 1970s and has contributed to the Journal of Wine Research, the Journal of Wine Economics, the American Wine Society, Wine Journal, the Oregon Wine Press, Practical Winery and Vineyard, Wine Press Northwest, the Slow Wine Guide USA, the World of Fine Wine magazine, which is a gorgeous magazine, by the way, as well as several leading wine websites, so he's quite prolific. Neal is a member of the American Wine Society, the American Association of Wine Economists, and the Circle of Wine Writers. He has just published his first book, Grape Explications, and he joins me now from his home in McMinnville, Oregon. Welcome, Neal. We're so glad you could join us.
Thank you, Natalie, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Neal. We are recording this just after New Year, although we will be publishing it a little bit after that. So, what was the most surprising insight you discovered while writing this book, Neal?
So the book is a compilation of articles that I've written over 50 years. And what struck me as I went through it and did my own light editing is how much my writing has changed about wine, what topics I thought were important. Between the time I first started drinking wine until the present, last article in there was written in 2024, my palate changed, my location changed, all reflected in the topics that I covered. Quite honestly, I think I became a better writer with practice. I was always complimented on my writing, but I think it's gotten more refined as a result of doing it more, but also reading marvelous wine writers who I'd love to talk about. I do a lot of book reviews, as you know, and I do get to read some marvelous prose about wine, which become models for me in my own writing.
That's terrific. Wow. So, yeah, it's a good survey of your writing and how you've changed as a writer, and I'm sure as a person. What was the most difficult part about writing the book?
A lot of the material was already written, at least in some form, and I went through and edited and so on. There's a whole culture surrounding, as you know, the creation of a book. And I had to learn that. So I read materials, I did research. I settled on a publisher, Luminary Press in Eugene, Oregon. The book is the complete Oregon product, by the way. And they were terrific, but the process of vetting potential publishers and then conforming to their process to produce a gorgeous looking book, quite frankly, I can show you.
You have it there. All right.
I have it right there.
Okay. And
this
so
is
for
the
those of you who are
paperback.
listening, we'll put a link in the show notes as well as the cover page,
Sure.
an image. Yeah.
This is the paperback. There's also a hardback and an ebook and so on. My goal was, of course, to produce something. It's considered self-published, but my goal was to have it indistinguishable from a conventionally published book. And I think Luminary Press wildly succeeded in that.
They have a great reputation. And these days, that old snobbery about self-publishing has gone the wayside. There's so much you can do now with a book. And even if you're with a traditional publisher, you're still having to do all that same work. There's not much advantage. And given that online sales are so important these days, it's not about bricks and mortar so much. More and more traditional authors are going to self-publishing, but that's a rabbit hole I won't go down.
I also like that because I'm very picky. I've dealt with editors that are good and editors that I had issues with. And in this particular case, I owned complete editorial control. There was nothing in that book. There is nothing in that book that doesn't reflect the way I wanted it. And that was very, very important to me. One of the things I did do when I created the book was I started with the or text, not the published text, because the published text had a lot of edits that I didn't necessarily agree with. In some cases, there were errors. Once in a while, I made them. Once in a while, the editor introduced it. And it was critically important for me to straighten all that out and have it say exactly what I wanted it to. So I'm usually in favor of self-publishing.
Yes, absolutely. And you've done so much publishing with your academic career as well and your background, which we'll get to momentarily. But let's talk about that first taste of wine. It was the Manischewitz Concord grapes. Wine have religious rituals. Now, I shouldn't chuckle. Everything's come a long way. But what was your impression of that wine back when you tasted it?
Cough syrup.
Yeah. That's being kind.
I'm Jewish, and it's a kosher wine, and we used it for rituals. on Friday night for my bar mitzvah and all that kind of stuff. It's just what you had. Now, my father, who actually had a reasonable palate, once switched over from the regular Concord grape to the dry Concord grape.
Okay. Was that an improvement?
It was an improvement, but it still didn't make it good.
It's like cherry flavored cough syrup, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, the sweetness was mitigated. It was still Concord grape wine.
Right, right.
Now, fortunately, I don't worry about kosher or anything like that, but I have relatives who do, and there is considerably better kosher wine out there that would be appropriate for rituals and so on.
Absolutely.
From all over the world. So
yeah, they've come a long, long way, just like other categories like organic and all kinds of others. So walk us through that moment in college when you tasted your first classified growth from Bordeaux and realized that wine could be so much more than that first taste that you had.
My first wine friend, John Nietrauer, whose mother, because he was underage, like I was at the time, provisioned him, this was in 1968, with a 61 Calon Segor and a 61 Léoville Escasse.
Wow. Top growths.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, he died a little over 3 years ago. But before he did, I asked him if he had recollection of when we cracked open one of those bottles. He didn't have the exact date, but he believes that it was when he prepared his mother's spaghetti sauce, and that we opened it up, and I believe it was the Léoville Escasse. It was a revelation, and it was enough. He had already had some good stuff, and he walked me through what to look for. The cedar notes and the fact that it was dry and balanced and lovely. I have a particularly good sense of smell. I rank that above my palate, especially as I age. And I'm sure the aromas at that time really showed me what wine could be. It was the beginning of me getting hooked. For a while, until we became of age in the United States, it's 21, it's still 21. I had to rely on other folks to get me the bottles and so on. It wasn't hard. We had an older friend whose parents, I believe he lived with his parents south of Chicago, and he was able to keep a stash of terrific wines there, and he would share those. We got to taste some remarkable stuff during my early years.
Well, that's marvelous. And then you co-founded the Duncan Hines Memorial Bon Vivant Fellowship International as an undergraduate. Tell us about this delightfully named organization and what prompted you to create a tradition of drinking German Auslese for bachelor's degrees, Baron Auslese for master's, and the Trockenbaron Auslese for PhDs.
Sure. So the organization was founded, I believe, I was in my junior year. I was really underage. And the Duncan Hines comes from the fact that my co-founder's last name was Dennis, and mine is Hulkower, so DH, and it suggested Duncan Hines. After undergrad disappeared, he was no longer active in that organization. It really didn't take off until I came back to Northwestern. I graduated in 1970, went to Texas for a year for grad school, dropped out, and then went back to Northwestern as a mathematician instead of an astronomer. And the organization came to life with a different set of players. We were in various stages in our education, so bachelor's degrees. Back then, even though we weren't admitting to liking sweet wines to the preference of anything else, a beautifully balanced Auslese was something we would seek out. Plus, it was affordable back then. You have to understand that we were drinking on graduate students' budgets, and so that was accessible. And then some of us got masters, and then I was the only one who actually finished a PhD. And we thought, well, gee, we did an Auslese for bachelor's. The next step up is beer and Auslese. Why not? And then the PhD, which again, I was the only one to actually finish.
Sure, sure. Which one was it and what year was it?
It was the 59 Steinberger Trockenbeer and Auslese. I finished in 1977. I had a tasting of 59 clarets in my tiny two-bedroom apartment, graduate housing, invited professors, one of my friends, and we finished with this marvelous nectar. I have the notes here if you're interested.
Oh, sure, sure.
So these are my notebooks, by the way,
Oh,
that we
yes,
talked
want to
about.
get to those. Yes.
Deep dark brownish apricot, which I corrected to be gold because brownish implies that it was materialized. It wasn't. Rich, intense, fruity aromas, thick, remarkable flavor, rich, thick, oily, cushy texture, initially a very pleasant acid tinge, could be the bubbles, followed by the honeyed fruit and a depth of finish never before experienced. Maintains and glorifies the family traits exhibited by the 71 Spätlese, actually showed some secondary fermentation. Nectar with good balance, sufficient acid, fantastic.
Wow, that's a great tasting note. And you were so young, too.
Yeah, and I don't do, well, I actually do, I still do tasting notes, but rarely. I had already been tasting wine at that time seriously for taking notes for 7 years, so I was practiced at writing the notes. But the interesting thing is when I think about it, I can almost imagine tasting it because it was like biting into a juicy apricot, with the sweetness and then that beautiful acidity. It was a truly remarkable wine. How I came across it is also interesting. Evanston was mostly dry, had no liquor stores when I was at Northwestern, and there was a wonderful wine shop that still exists on the border with Skokie called Schaefer's. That's where I spent a good part of my graduate stipend. And George Schaefer, who was the proprietor at the time, I was looking for a Trockenbeer and Auslese. He had this bottle of the Steinberger that he was willing to sell to me for the remarkable price of $85. This is a lot of money in 1977. And it had just gone at auction for $200. The only condition was that I had to pour off an ounce for him. And that was a no-brainer. But it was, for a long time, the most expensive bottle I had ever bought. $85. My stipend was, I think at that time, maybe $250 a month, something like that.
Oh, wow. Half a month.
I had a wife and a daughter. Groceries would cost $20, $25 a week. So to give you sort of a context, $85 was a lot of money. And it was worth every penny, given that it's almost 50 years, and I'm still smiling thinking about drinking it,
I'll bet. That's quite memorable. And so you've mentioned, you just showed us the notebooks, and between 1969 and 79, you kept meticulous notebooks on 450 wines in 4 small notebooks, recording everything from prices to tasting notes. What drove you back then? I mean, you were enraptured with wine, but as a young mathematician, why did you want to document the tasting journey versus just enjoying the wines? I'm sure you enjoyed them too.
Oh, I enjoyed them.
Yes.
The first notes were written in 1970, so we're looking at 56 years ago. I wanted to remember the experience. I think that without trying to guess all the way back, I wanted to keep a record of, because this was so new to me, having graduated from Manischewitz and the sacramental wines, and the fact that it was, I have a really, as I said, I have a really good sense of smell, and it was, to me, it was another form of art that I was exposing, in particular, my olfactory senses to. And, I wanted to try to capture that as well as I could in words. I think it's futile. I know you write tasting notes. I still write them for limited things, and certainly for when I have to publish something. But it's been said that there's millions of aromas and sensations and chemical reactions and so on, and yet we only have a finite vocabulary to do it. So it's sort of an exercise in futility to try to reconstruct what it was like to actually taste that wine from simply reading what you wrote, or certainly what somebody else wrote. But there I was. I mean, yeah, I was a blossoming academic. You write things down, you keep track. I was a scientist, so you record lots and lots of detail. It fit my personality then. I'm still hardcore, aged, venerable nerd now. And I appreciate the fact that I did that. It's given me a lot of fuel for some of my writing.
Yeah, those are great memories,
Yeah.
almost like a travel journal, but for the senses. So you completed your PhD in applied mathematics at Northwestern University in 1977, and then you tried your hand in academia for a while at Vanderbilt University teaching mathematics?
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Yes.
And then you decided to leave academia and you went in to quite an august business career that took you through 11 states, working at some of the most respected technology and aerospace companies, eventually becoming president and CEO of RAF Technology. How did you balance this demanding career with your growing passion for wine, or did they just naturally fit together?
There were a number of reasons why I left academics. I had a small family to support, and the salary was meager. But as I tell folks, I couldn't afford good wine, and my then wife couldn't find a job. So we were living on my meager academic salary. And I had issues, an adjustment and so on and pay. And so we headed west to California, and I became a rocket scientist. That was the initial thing I did. I worked for Jet Propulsion Lab. All the times that I did this bouncing around, I was ratcheting up my salary. In California, of course, I became heavily exposed to California wines. That was 1979 when we moved there. And that was, only 3 years after the Judgment of Paris. And so California wines were on everybody's radar. Quite frankly, I found them at that time to play second fiddle to the stuff I had been drinking as a graduate student, which included the classified growth clarets, the beautiful Rieslings from Germany, and in particular the Pinot Noirs from Burgundy. California Pinots couldn't hold a candle to them. They were too fruity. They lacked complexity. But I compromised and I tasted around and so on. The full-time employment enabled me to have the resources to maintain a small but growing stock of wine. It was always a hobby, but a pretty intense one. It was an excuse for socializing. I made some converts, that I could taste with. And as I moved around, some states had viable wine areas. Washington State has a beautiful wine area, and that's where I was the CEO of a small software company. I lived in Virginia. Virginia is not to be ignored. They've got some seriously good vino there, and it's progressively better.
That's interesting. Yeah, we don't get any Virginia wine up here yet, but yeah, I'm sure it's coming. That was the home of
Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, who took grape plantings from Bordeaux and planted them in Monticello or something like that.
Monticello, and they unfortunately didn't take, but there are vineyards there now that are thriving. I think even at Monticello, but
okay.
When I lived there, there was some stuff that was less interesting, but now I have a daughter who still lives there, so we go back, and and I try to pick up some examples. and they're quite enjoyable. It's vinifera. It's not the hybrids. Cab Franc is very big there. Petit Mansang is now displacing Viognier as the white of choice in Virginia. I did a book signing in May of last year now at a winery that specializes in that, and it's pretty nice stuff. For when I lived in areas that had a wine region, I could pop over and check out Virginia wines. I lived in Massachusetts for a long time. I worked at the Mitre Corporation, my favorite grown-up job. And there's actually a tiny wine region near the border with Rhode Island, which also has a microscopic wine region. And there's a winery in Massachusetts called Westport River Winery that makes pretty credible sparkling wines. When you think about it, sparkling wines are generally made from grapes that are slightly underripe. And given that it's cold in Massachusetts, it was a suitable place for that. So I popped over there a couple of times.
So you learned as you went, wherever your business travels took
Precisely.
you, your wine palate followed. And then you say in 2011 you had your last full-time grown-up job, and you moved to McMinnville and became a freelance wine writer. Describe that transition from sort of analyzing risks for billion-dollar government programs to analyzing whether, Pinot shows a whole cluster fermentation character or whatever, or did it just sort of naturally evolve that way?
Yes, and there was a bit of random walk, from topic to topic. So the transition was that they converted me from a full-time, I was a vice president of technical something or other. I had some fancy title. Got to be too expensive, converted me to a consultant. I did some consulting back there. And I said, good, I don't have to live in Virginia anymore. We had bought our place in Oregon in 2009, and we're coming out here part-time. I worked here. I'm in my office right now where I work back in Virginia. And we said, okay, so we sold our place in Virginia. We had this place. We came over. And I said, now I'm going to get the permit to try to go and work in tasting rooms and start applying for that. And I said, I'm going to write, because I guess I should rewind back to 2009. There was a hiatus between about 1977, when I published my last article in now defunct Vintage magazine, and when I started writing about wine. In between, I wrote about all kinds of things. I have a large list of publications, reports, and so on technical matters and the various things that I did for my job and so on. But in 2009, we went to see the movie Bottle Shock. And at that time, I had been interested in what's called a board account, which is a way of aggregating preferences. And it's actually the way we should vote, but we can talk about that separately. The reason I got into it is my dissertation advisor, Don Sari, got into it after I finished my PhD. My PhD, just for the record, was in a field called celestial mechanics, which is the mathematical modeling of the motion of heavenly bodies. And my topic was the zero energy three-body problem. Anybody who's watching this may have seen the Netflix
the
three-body problem. Yeah. Not to be too picky, but that was actually the restricted four-body problem, but who's counting?
Apparently you are, as a mathematician.
Yeah. So, long before that, I did that, and I solved a 90-year-old problem. Celestial mechanics is a particularly difficult field. Newton basically started it, and all the easy problems were solved, and what's left are really hard problems. So not letting many people go into this. While I was there, he got interested in mathematical economics, and he started looking at voting methods. So he proved some of the central theorems that show the uniqueness of the Borda count. And I got interested in that. And when I was at the MITRE Corporation, I had him out to talk. Some of the people in my organization, I was a department head in the Economic and Decision Analysis Center there for a while. Some of the people applied that to some of our work. And I was watching this movie, and I was wondering how they came up with the ranking for the
the
whites
bottle
and
shock,
the reds.
not
Bottle
the three
shock.
body
Yeah,
problem.
back to bottle shock. Yeah.
Bottle shock. And was this based on the 1976 Judgment of Paris, Tasting in Paris?
Yes.
That movie?
Yes,
Okay.
it was. But only
Okay.
the whites. He only focused on the whites.
Okay.
There's an interesting thing that there's a book by George
Tabor. Yes. Judgment of Paris. Yeah.
Judgment of Paris. And he was trying to make a movie at the same time this came out.
Oh, okay.
There was some noise that it was going to happen, but then it never happened. So I'm watching this movie and saying, I wonder how they came up with the ranking. Because,
right.
Border was on my mind. Wine is always on my mind. And this was my very first opportunity to bang the two together. I started doing research. I got in touch with George Tabor. I got his book, which is marvelous. And I collected all of the, as much as possible, the original data. And I redid it using the Borda count. So the issue is that the way they came up with the ranking is that each of the judges on a 20-point scale ranked a wine. And then they
gave it
added
a score
up,
out of 20?
Yeah, it was 0 to 20.
Okay.
Not 100. This is more like what Jancis Robinson uses.
Yes.
She uses a 20-point scale. I think there were some crude guidelines given for them, but the numbers were all over the place. And when you add up the scores like that, somebody who scores, say, everything between 90 and 100, there are no 100-point wines, has a disproportionate influence on the final sum than somebody who rates in the 80s. Okay, this violates one judge, one vote. Now, there's a whole controversy as to whether or not that's a bad thing. I happen to think it's a bad thing. So I said, gee, Borda can fix that. And I sat down and I converted the scores to rankings, aggregated them using the Borda count, and came up with a different outcome for the red.
And just to step back for a minute,
Sure.
I don't have your math background, but Borda, if I understand it in a crude way, says that every judge just gives a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or whatever, like just a numeric ranking, not a score out of 20 or whatever. But,
right.
Each wine gets one, like if you've got 20 wines, there's going to be one first place wine, one second place wine, one third, and that gets a standard number of points so that it's the same across each judge, rather than the loud voice, the person who scores 99 for everything, having the scales tipped in their favor for the winners.
Precisely, although there is a way of doing Borda that allows ties. And in this conversion from the scores to the rankings, there were, in fact, wines that had the same scores. So that translated into the same ranking. Basically, what you do is you average those Borda scores. So if you have 10 wines, the top ranked wine gets 9 points, second 8, all the way down to 0. You can actually do it with 10, 9, 8, 7 all the way down to 1, but it doesn't change the outcome. What's critical is that spacing has to be exactly the same. Any change in that spacing distorts the outcome.
Right.
And so when I did that, the 1970 Aubryon came in first place, and the Stag's Leap, which was advertised to be in first place, came in a close second. In the whites, the Montelena persisted in first place.
Okay.
Now, down the column, there were also little puts and takes. So I wrote this all up. There were some nuances relating to the fact that some of the original scores for the whites were lost, and so there was some slight discrepancy, minor. And this really gets into nerdy stuff that we don't have to get into. But I said, this is novel. Nobody's come up with this before. They've done statistical studies, and we can get into that too. But nobody did applying the board account to it. So I wrote it up, sent it into the Journal of Wine Research, and it was published. It's a referee journal, went through rigorous peer review, and it was published. So now I was back in the wine writing business, banging together my two loves, math and wine. Yay! It was great. Then I said, okay, most people who love wine don't read the Journal of Wine Research. And before we moved to Oregon, we would come out here and reconnoiter and so on. And there's this nice publication called the Oregon Wine Press. And monthly, nice, very nice publication. And I said, I'd like to write for them. And the first thing I published was in 2011, shortly after we became permanent Oregon residents. And it was called Border is Better. And I call it the Golden Book version of my piece in the Journal of Wine Research. Then I was hooked. And so, I started looking for excuses to write. But the transition from Virginia to Oregon, except for the actual physical getting the house ready and so on in Virginia, was smooth. That was a 6-week hell period and so on. But we moved here, we settled in, changed our registration, said goodbye to Virginia. And I started looking again for writing gigs and then also tasting room gigs.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Neal. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, how can a single bottle of wine completely change your understanding of what wine can be? I just love the story that Neal tells about his wine friend John, whose mother was very, very indulgent, gave him a 61 Canon Séguer and a 61 Léoville Lacasse, both top-notch Bordeaux. This was back in 1968. And, he prepared his mother's spaghetti sauce, so his mother did teach him something useful there. And it was a revelation, the wine, not the sauce. So John had already tasted the good stuff, and he really started to ignite Neal's passion for wine, sort of open the world to what it tasted like when it's a fine wine, cedar notes, dry, balanced. I've had those moments, have you? Number 2, what makes a wine so remarkable that you can almost taste it again in your memory decades later? For Neal, this was the 59 Steinberger Trockenbeerenauslese. I'm going to say that again, Trockenbeerenauslese. I love saying that. Deep, dark gold apricot, not oxidized, Neal says. Intensely fruity. Can you imagine? Still holding up. Remarkably rich, thick, oily, cushy texture. Pleasant acid tinge, honeyed fruit, depth of finish. My goodness. I mean, just listening to it, I start to taste it. Neal's ghost wine in my own mind or palate. And finally, why are people drawn to tasting notes on fool's errands like me, like Neal, even when words can never fully capture the experience of tasting and smelling wine? Neal's first notes were written in 1970, so you're looking at 56 years ago. He wanted to capture that experience. I think that's what drives all artists, whether they're writers, painters, whatever, and regular human beings. We all want to capture those experiences, those highs in our life, right? And he had just graduated from Manischewitz and Sacramental wines. He had a great sense of smell. He said, we have a limited, finite vocabulary, but he still wanted to press on. He was an academic, so that's what he did. He observed, he wrote, he thought, he revised, and that was kind of the approach he brought to wine writing. Right, so if you missed episode 12, go back and take a listen. I chat about wine scores and tasting notes. Are they misleading or helpful? I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite. For the first few years that I wrote about wine, I didn't score them, as I just didn't have the confidence to do it. I just wrote tasting notes. However, my readers kept asking for scores, as they really wanted this shorthand for their shopping lists. Some wanted to do a quality-price ratio analysis, or QPR, using my score for quality against the price of the wine, like the way they evaluate shares of a company. So to be of service, I started rating wines. However, I still don't score wines below 80, as I don't think they're worth your time or attention. Do you really want to remember a long list of wines that you shouldn't buy? However, this easily understood shorthand for quality is also the most difficult to pin down. Is 85 good, very good, or great? You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Neal. And to give you a little taste of future guests, we'll have Michael Finnerty on pairing wine and cheese, Sarah Heller, Master of Wine, on the shape and texture of wine, Dr. Charles Knowles, who has just published a best-selling memoir, which was just reviewed in the New York Times, Why We Drink Too Much, Marisol de la Fuente on the wines of Argentina, Alan Ramey, author of the new book Pressing Matters, about starting a career journey in the wine world, and Nicole and Ramon Bassett on the book Tasting Victory, the Life and Wines of the World's Favorite Sommelier, Gerard Bassett. Do you have questions for any of our guests? Please let me know. Do you know someone who'd be interested in learning more about tasting wine, especially those that can change your world? Please let them know about the podcast. Email or text them now while you're thinking about it. Please. It's easy to find the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. Just tell them to search for that title or my name, Natalie McLean Wine, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, their favorite podcast app, or they can listen to it on my website, nataliemclean.com/podcast. Email me if you have a sip tip question or if you'd like to win one of 3 books that I have to give away. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this episode or if you've read my book or are listening to it. Email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. In the show notes, you'll also find a link to take a free online food and wine pairing class with me called The 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix It Forever at nataliemclean.com/class. That's all in the show notes, nataliemclean.com/376. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a wine that takes you back in time. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.